Morning. Welcome to today's section of Shmiras HaLashon. We are in Shmiras HaLashon Book 2, Chapter 17, and we are going to discuss the place that got this whole thing started. That's right. So in Parshat Kedoshim and Bahar. Now, there's so much in Kedoshim, obviously we had to put Bahar in here too. Which I thought was funny when I started reading through the section over here. Like, why did we do this? We need an honorable mention for Bahar. We'll see in just a minute. But let us go to the place where this whole don't say bad things about people started. So it says in Parshas Kedoshim, this is chapter 19, verse 16. Lo selech rochil be'amecha, walk thou not as a talebearer amongst your people. I don't know why people used to talk that way. Don't go telling tales. That's what it says, amongst your people. So the word itself is very interesting because this includes not only the tale bearing itself, but also any bad speech. And this is all explained in the Yerushalmi. He says it's in Yerushalmi. I mean, Rashi says it. Rashi's quoting the Midrash, the Midrash, the Sifra. It says the following: Rechilus is what it's called. If someone says, "Oh, he's quoting a Yerushalmi," okay. So anyway. We'll see here in a second what he's quoting. He says, "Okay, so if a person says to his friend, so and so said such and such to me, or he did to you such and such," and Lashon Hara is called the following: if someone talks about his friend with a disrespectful or a disreputable manner, or they in some humiliating fashion, okay, or other things that cause some form of damage to his person, or that results in loss of income, or simply just to make him feel bad, just to give him a bad time. This prohibition includes that, and that form of activity, and that activity is called Lashon Hara. And this is also quoted by our Chachamim in their explanation of this pasuk. Be not like a rochel. Do not be like one who goes about selling their wares from place to place, because he carries one thing from here and he carries it to there, right? And you should know that that's where the Rashi thing gets in. I didn't recall that he brings that statement of Rashi later on here. Now, this is even when you are carrying and bearing stories that are true, which is what everybody says. Because if it's false, well, we call that Motzi Shemra, and Motzi Shemra is really worse, and that's not even in our chapter. We'll get to that later. Because regular Lashon Hara is one thing, because immediately after this verse here of don't be a talebearer, it says one shall judge their countrymen favorably, okay, or righteously. And the rabbis explain this in the following way. That is, which is the Mishnah Avos in the first chapter, the 5th Mishnah, judge everyone favorably. Okay, so meaning righteousness means to tilt with, when you're judging people with righteousness, it means to tilt the opinion in their favor. And this is also something that gives us an understanding of our own situation, which is that even if you see something which appears to be rather insidious about somebody else, nonetheless, you need to find meritorious things about them, because maybe something was said in error, or maybe that was done in error, okay? And if you don't know the reason why that was done, or why it was prohibited to do such a thing, okay, or say such a thing, or maybe they already have a sense of they're already looking to seek forgiveness for themselves. They're already relenting on such behavior. All of these type of things are all included in that. And so too, we're being alerted to the following, which is to not carry about these stories about other people, especially when those stories are rather disruptive, disrespectful, and carry carry very, very not nice things, right? They're quite embarrassing, let's say. And all of these things on Lashon Hara and Rechilus and how bad they are. I wrote a whole book. I wrote a book called Chafetz Chaim, and in fact, that's what the whole first half of this entire book was all about. Okay. Now, also in the next verse, it says, "Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha," do not stand by upon the blood of your friend, for I am Hashem. Rashi explains, one should not stand by and watch them die. Okay? And you could save them. Okay? For example, somebody's drowning in a river. Or maybe they're being attacked by a wild animal or wild robbers. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says the following. This is the Gemara is on page 73a, that if you are not able to save him by yourself, you're still obligated to go find people who could engage in saving them, right? You don't have to save him from the cliff's edge, but you better sure call 911, right? So that's the idea, is that you should be able to do that for him. And actually, what the Gemara is even saying is that you are even financially obligated to invest in hiring people to do that, to save them. And this pasuk relies on the one that precedes it of lo telech rachil, go not about bearing tales. And the reason why it's saying this is that if you go ahead and do rachilus and you share the story, right? It goes viral, right? So that is one of the largest forms of violating this prohibition that a person could see. And you are one who initiates a significant amount of hatred against yourself by that other person. You have initiated it. It's almost as if you injected the hatred into the other person. That's a better translation. Because the Hebrew is you have injected the fury of another person. You have incited. You have incited the fury of another person against you. I'm like a walking thesaurus here. And this could be dangerous. This could be very dangerous. Okay? Why? Well, he says in parentheses, it's like the case of Doeg HaAdomi in front of Shaul. Okay? Sidebar. He brings up the example and doesn't explain it. Doeg HaAdomi is the one who tells Shaul HaMelech that when King David is hiding from him, he went to Nov to seek refuge amongst the Kohanim of Nov. And Doeg goes and says, David's hiding with the Kohanim of Nov. So Shaul is mad, and he goes and he kills everybody. And there's actually a lot more that comes of this, but that's why that Lashon Hara was so terrible, because he goes in and kills all the Kohanim wrongly. They did not deserve to be dead, to be killed. Now, when you do say the Rechilus, he says, you are now obligated in many ways to remove this danger from yourself, right? You made him angry, and now it's up to you to make sure that it goes away. Okay? So, and if it's not you, then other people can go make it feel better, right? So he's angry because you opened your mouth. Now he's angry at you, and you now have to remedy the situation. It's your fault that everyone got to this place, right? Okay, so had you just kept your mouth shut and he was angry at you, not your problem. Now that you opened your mouth and he's angry at you, is your problem. Now, Rashi says further on that when the pasuk says, I am Hashem, it's saying Hashem is basically inserting a seal of approval that I will reward those who follow this, okay? And meaning that they withhold from telling stories, and they make the effort to save their brethren from all types of dangerous situations. And I am also the one that you can trust to hold someone accountable, right? If they do the opposite, he says this is also something that the Tosefta says in Peah. So the first one in Peah talks about all the good things you get in the world to come, and in the second mission says here's all the things that you get if you do these violations. So the second Mishnah in Peah, and it's in the Tosefta, and there are three things that are collected from a person during their lifetime in this world, and the principal amount of violations that are held against you, whatever it says here, the principal amount, which is basically to say that there's a certain penalty attached to it that's going to follow you into the next world. So if you do avodah zarah, right, if you worship idols, okay, and if you do illicit relations, right? So if you violate any of the illicit relations, like sodomy or incest, and also if you do some type of murder, right? Those things, it's terrible, right? Oh, nothing beats lashon hara. That sticks to you more than anything else. Okay, and we saw several chapters ago about how it follows you. Even we quoted that Zohar talks about how it not only does it follow you, but everything that it does, it sticks to all the mitzvahs. Every mitzvah you do is like dirtied with the lashon hara. But it further says here in the very next pasuk, right? Not pasuk 17, this is the command to reprove those who overstep their boundaries. Reprove them, rebuke them, but do not incur some form of sin against yourself. So what does that mean? It means rebuke them without humiliating them. That's what it means, says the Chafetz Chaim. Even if it is a rebuke, you still have to be careful, because there's a good rebuke and there's a not good rebuke. Okay, especially if you're doing something that's not meant as a form of rebuke and you humiliate somebody, right? Malbin Panei Chavero, which is to make their face turn white. The sin is so great you can't even bear it. Meaning, it's one thing to do something and you're like, I can live with that mistake. This is a mistake you can't live with. Because the Gemara says in Bava Metzia, this is 58b, that one who causes one's face to be whitened in public, meaning they publicly humiliate somebody, they are the same as someone who is a murderer. Okay? And the Gemara goes into that in great detail on the next page. Okay? It says a person would rather be thrown into the flaming pit than have to humiliate somebody publicly. Where do we see that? From the case of Tamar, right? This is a famous understanding. We touched on this a little bit when we talked about this parsha in a previous chapter. But the idea is that that when they found her, and then she went ahead and presented all of the items. Okay, and we see from that case that if a person was really held responsible and accountable for these things, they have to still be very careful that while they're doing it, they don't humiliate the other person. So Tamar was busy pulling all these things, saying, "Hey, who is the one to whom all of these objects belong? That's the person who's the father of these children." And then he was like, "Oh, that's me." She did not violate our agreement, right? This is still in the family, and so that's why we have to be so careful. And the Gemara says, furthermore, that someone who normally humiliates people has no place in the world to come. Okay. Now let's talk about Parshas Bahar. Okay. So over here we're going to talk about a mitzvah known as Ona'ah. So the Torah warns us, this is in chapter 28, verse 17, do not oppress your countrymen. So just like the Torah says, you shouldn't say things that hurt them, that are verbal, which is that you shouldn't pick a fight with them, you shouldn't do this, right? That's what you shouldn't do. The Gemara explains this further, the same Gemara, that we know there's two types of ona'ah. There's one type of oppression that is accomplished through money, and there's one type of oppression that we now see is also accomplished through words. How do I oppress somebody with my words? How do I hold them down and keep them back by using words? Right? Well, obviously one attacks them personally, and one just, I'm taking more money than I really should. However, when it comes to money, I can give the money back. But the words are, once they're out there, they're already out there. And the Gemara explains this further, that there is many gates that are closed, that they don't pay attention to what you're doing, except for the gate of oppression. Because behind the gate of oppression there is always something open there for people to come and complain about, right? That complaint department is always open. And the complaints of onas devarim, of being oppressed with other people's words, is also included in Lashon Hara when we talk about it. And we talk about this in Maseches Yuma, Mem Dal Amud Aleph. Okay, so that is Bahar B'chukosai. And let's also do let's finish off over here with Baha'alos. Let's do Baha'alos, even though it's in the next book. It's pretty short. So this is chapter 17. This is chapter 18. Okay, so Baha'aloscha. Some of these chapters get really short, so we'll probably double a couple of them up. Let's talk about Parshas Baha'aloscha. Okay, so this is the famous story of where they speak against Moshe. Okay, so here's what we learn about Lashon Hara from this case. So it says that, and this is in Bamidbar now, we're in chapter 12, okay, that they speak about Moshe. And here's what we learn. So number one, we learn over here that the prohibition even attaches to one who is already very humble and already, very, very simple person. So Moshe Rabbeinu is called the most humble person, and definitely one of the he's not one of the people who aggrandizes himself. He's the opposite. He very much is very humble and very low and very unassuming. Okay, and that's why it says over there in the third pasuk he is super humble. So number one, even though he himself won't take it personally, when you say something about him, it becomes, since you made it personal, it is now judged as something personal. The second thing we see over here, even if you were trying to do the right thing by him, right? You're trying to benefit him. Okay? So, especially if he was, destitute, had like nothing left, okay? Okay? And he, through a lot of his own devices and his own time investment, tried to do something for them, okay? And you have this relationship with them, so you try to save them significantly, like you save them from danger. And what Miriam does for Moshe, she obviously saves him from the Nile, right? From when they put him in the river, okay? And she helps find the case of Batya and so on and so forth, right? Now we also see, there's a third thing he points out, that Lashon Hara attaches to someone who is being spoken about, right, or who is the subject of the Lashon Hara, is even if it's not in front of many people, okay? And even if it's just in front of relatives, okay? So, meaning it's only her and Aharon who are having this conversation, maybe a couple of the people are present, that they have a significant concern about Moshe's behavior, okay? That they should not and share it with other people. That's another thing. The fourth thing that you see over here is if someone makes a statement about one of the greatest people in their country, okay? They say his conduct is unbecoming of his greatness. His conduct is something that attaches to his behavior and things that he does, and if the conduct is becoming of it, if he's one person that is unique in his generation, okay. But if a person is not so unique in his generation, he's like other famous people in the country, or very well-respected people. So his conduct should be consummate with his rank. However he is being held in esteem in society, that should help to define his behavior. Okay? So if you start commenting on it, this is also Lashon Hara in its fullest. Because the error that's being made is they're trying to say that Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, is comparable to all other prophets. And also to the level of our forefathers. Okay? So all those things we're trying to say are all part of Moshe Rabbeinu. And we're trying to put him into that box. Okay? And these things are all stated in the Sifri. This was why they were so concerned that and so amazed that he separated from his wife with complete abandon. But everybody else had wives with them while they led the Jewish people. And so therefore, God gives them a response. He says, let's later on in the 6th and 7th pasuk, right? Because again, the story moves very fast. Right? He says, it's one thing to be a prophet like all the other prophets. But Moses is different. He was on a higher level, okay? Because he had to be constantly ready for prophecy, okay? And that's why he couldn't ever be around his wife or even be around most other people. So what happens? So the story continues that Aaron turns to Miriam and she turns white. Okay, that's what happens in that chapter in verse 10. Okay, because Lashon Hara brought the tsaras on her body, and we had said previously a couple chapters ago there was a concept known as the mitzora muchlat. Okay, that a person becomes a confirmed or an established mitzora. Okay, and the Gemara in Arachin talks about that in page 15, because it says in the pasuk 101 in Tehillim, Book of Psalms, chapter 101, verse 5, that those who speak against their friend in private shall be afflicted. Okay, meaning that there's a promise that Hashem is going to do something with them very publicly. And that statement is smitzus, okay, which is l'chalutin, and we say that this is something that happens to them, okay? So this is what happens to them is they become a metzora as a result of this, and that is what creates them, that's what creates a sense of them being excluded from everybody else. And we talked about that a lot in Parshas Tazria Metzora. But that just connects us back to those statements. So we will hold it here. We'll pick up with famous people are just people, but talking about them when our business seems in most cases not gossip and Lashon Hara. So the point is that you shouldn't be questioning why they act a certain way. So, why are they not spending more time with their family? Why are they this, why that? Because the weight of the community is being leveled upon them. That's something significant to be concerned about. They're not just regular people. They have a lot going on. Okay, so that's why it's important to focus on not saying anything against them. So to be sensitive to their position. And with that, we will conclude our discussion this week. We will pick up next time in chapter 19, and we will duly note that we did 18 and 19 today. I wasn't sure if we were going to get through 18 and 19, but the subject matter was rather straightforward in both of these chapters. So I will add that to the topic heading. Thank you very much for joining. We will discuss more about these topics in next week's class. Have a wonderful day. Take care.